your opinion, and also kind of like if you have any factual data as far as like the the nurses and stuff like that basically getting canned because they don't want to get vaccinated, which is a personal choice at that point.
Yeah, and I don't know anything. I can't say anything along those lines other than to warn people that, remember, when you see something in the media, almost always it's something that's uncommon. So if you're seeing people getting fired because they're not vaccinated, my knee-jerk reaction is that that's probably uncommon. That's what puts it in the news in the first place. But having said that, I don't know. I don't have the data on any of that. I'll give you a couple thoughts, though, on the whole vaccine mandate. The first that comes to mind is the question, and I say this without prejudice one way or the other about the vaccine, but simply a question: is that constitutional? That the federal government could, in effect, deputize employers everywhere, telling them that they're now responsible for making sure that their employees are vaccinated. And I don't know, from a strict reading of the Constitution, clearly this isn't one of the powers listed in Article 1, Section 8, but we ditched Article 1, Section 8 about 70 years ago. So I don't know. I will say this, and as much of a free marketer as I am, as much as I believe in people's individual freedom, I have to remind people that a free market is not anarchic. It's not you can do whatever you want. It's you can do whatever you want, provided you aren't imposing harm on anyone else. That is, even in a free market environment, there is a good and prescribed role for government to play, and that is to prevent people from harming each other. And it doesn't just mean to prevent people from beating on each other. It means to prevent businesses from defrauding their customers, to prevent people from polluting the environment, all this sort of thing. And if you accept that, and what I've said isn't controversial, you ask pretty much any free market economist, what's the role of government? And they'll tell you exactly what I just told you. But here's where the whole situation gets dicey. The being infected and walking around in public and potentially infecting other people looks exactly, from an economist's perspective, like pollution. It's no different than a factory belching out chemicals into the atmosphere and you inhale it and now you get sick or whatever it is. So too here. Now, I've floated this argument before with some people, and they've come back with a strange counter-argument, what I perceive to be strange. And their counter-argument is, no, being infectious and pollution are not the same thing because often you don't know whether you're infectious. And that strikes me as completely ancillary to the question. The question is whether you're imposing a harm on someone else. Now, you may not realize that you're doing it, but that doesn't change the nature of what's going on. So I'm kind of left in this space that, as much as I dislike the government stepping in and saying, all right, you have to get vaccinated, I have to admit that infection looks almost identical to pollution. And if I'm prepared to say that there's a good and proper role for government in preventing companies from polluting, I think I also have to say that there's a good and proper role for government to insist that people be vaccinated.
Right. And is this like an ethics thing, or is this an actual something that the government can, a card they can actually pull without kind of any crazy ramifications?
Yeah, well, I'm not making an ethical argument here. I'm making an economic argument.
Okay.
That the infection, the technical term we'd use is a negative externality. The infection represents a negative externality in the exact same way that pollution is a negative externality. It's imposing a cost on someone else.
That's, I literally have never thought of it like that, but you saying that makes total sense. If that makes, like, as far as like from an economic standpoint, like the government cannot allow businesses, even in a free market, to do any type of damage, whether, like you said, it's actual pollution or it's this type of thing, which that makes total sense to me.
Yeah. Now, and there's all sorts of important footnotes to this. Things like, well, how do we know the vaccine works? And what are the long-term ramifications? And what if I just decide to stay in my house? And
Hmm.
I understand all of that, but I would argue those things are more questions of how would you apply this rule rather than questions of is this rule really a thing?
Right, right. Yeah, that makes total sense. Wow, that's crazy. You literally kind of just blew my mind because I've always looked at it. I'm also not an economist, so that helps. But I've never looked at it as like, because I look at it as like you said earlier, kind of like news threads and just emotion versus fact. And like, wow, like okay, maybe the government is looking out for us as consumers in a certain way when you look at it at that, if that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, now I wouldn't go so far as to say that, right? but I would simply stop at the line of saying, look, it seems that this is a good and proper role for government to do this.